Hey, what's going on, guys? Thanks so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe below to get all of my new videos and hit the bell icon to make sure they hit your notifications as soon as you log into YouTube. Thanks. Okay, so breaking down the NBA scandal specifically, I think there are two parties that are responsible for the NBA raid, other than obviously the players that participate in it, but what caused the Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, Terry Rozier, everybody else that's going to be implicated in this across sports, but starting with the NBA. What caused this to really manifest itself and really allow this to happen? And I think the response to that is really two parties. It is the gambling companies, namely DraftKings and FanDuel, among others, but DraftKings and FanDuel, who have the most advertising dollars and are now on every sports media show, they're on every podcast, and the sports media. I think those are the two categories and the two culprits, not pulpits, culprits that we are going to examine today. And so when you look at how sports, and I've been a fan of sports basically my entire life, have been turned from a cultural institution, which they were, it was almost like church in a way. It's like a religious experience. I think music is very similar to this. When you gather people from all walks of life to root for a team, to cheer on somebody, to hate somebody else, in the case of a bit of rivalry or whatever have you in NFL or college football or whatever, when you looked at how that has morphed from a institution, an inherently Christian institution, by the way, sports were pioneered in America by the YMCA, the Young Men's Christian Association, so it's a Christian concept as well, for discipleship to mentorship, particularly for young boys and young men. When you looked at how it is turned from that to a tool for power and for profit, which is what these institutions are, the inflation of sports media. It's no longer news anymore. It's called sports media. Notice it's not called sports news, not even called sports commentary anymore. It's called media in that way. And DraftKings and FanDuel, who have successfully commoditized sports into blowing it up into something that it should never have been. These institutions, the gambling companies, the direct-to-consumer gambling companies, and the sports media companies, which are now massive and have been massive for a very long time, those are the two parties we need to hold most responsible as far as I'm concerned. And we need to have a serious analysis of what's going on there. And so we're going to get to sports media later, but I want to talk about the gambling companies now. And really, I think there are three reasons that the gambling companies have had such a destructive effect on American sports and have led to this bust with Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones and Terry Rozier and everybody like that. And I think the first one is the sports leagues, in a desperate attempt to make money, particularly in the case of Major League Basketball, Major League Football, so pro football, pro basketball, and college football. Those are the three ones that are huge. Baseball in a way as well, but and like I said, baseball corruption has always been a thing ever since baseball was founded back in the late 1800s and early 1900s when it started getting big and America's pastime and all that. But when you look at the market cap, and there are a lot of complaints with Roger Goodell, for example, but what I can say about, and I have no love lost for Roger Goodell myself, but what I think people discount about Roger Goodell and the way the NFL is run is that Roger Goodell is still has a job, and Roger Goodell in many ways should not have a job. He is really messed up with concussion protocol stuff. He's really messed up with domestic violence stuff. He's really messed up with injury stuff. He's really messed up in many ways. But the reason why Roger Goodell is the highest paid commissioner in pro sports by a wide, with the exception of maybe Dana White, who owns all of it. So Roger Goodell is not an owner. He is an employee of the NFL, the highest paid employee of the NFL. But the reason why Goodell still has a job is because he has made a lot of people money. He has made a lot of people money. Adam Silver is kind of the same way as the commissioner of the NBA. I don't know, I follow football much closer than basketball, but Adam Silver has been the most quote-unquote player-friendly commissioner. He is not like David Stern. He is not like anybody that has really chaired the NBA since that point. Adam Silver is largely responsible for the decline of NBA basketball. I think he's managed that league incredibly poorly, but they have made a lot of people rich. They've made a lot of players rich. They've made a lot of advertisers rich. Notice how, the corporate takeover of all the stadiums, all of the advertisements, all of the things that they have, across their commercial breaks when they go to, all these stuff, all the advertisements on the jerseys now, especially in the NBA has this. But they've really, So the way that Roger Goodell, it's almost like Eric Weinstein has this concept called an embedded growth obligation, which after the 1970s, he said corporations optimized for one thing, which was growth at all costs. And that has obviously led value to decline, led people to get screwed over in various different ways. And I think that that's right. And I think that pro sports is very similar in this category. And so they have gotten in bed with a lot of shady companies and shady organizations in the past, especially with the NBA, with, Black Lives Matter, with Bud Light, all of these things that have blown up in the face of all of these people that are advertising. More Bud Light with the NFL stuff, because NBA, that's not really their target audience of the people that drink Bud Light, but particularly with Black Lives Matter in the NBA, Bud Light in the NFL, they have all been examples of where this getting cozy with the wrong types of people and optimizing for dollars rather than fan engagement and quality of the game, which will naturally attract everything else, it's just gone too far. And the biggest extension of this was the gambling companies. It was getting in bed with the gambling companies, with FanDuel, with DraftKings, with, whoever else for advertising revenue and for just raw pursuit of profit, pursuit of dollars, which has obviously, when you get a taste of that drug, because gambling pays a lot of money, remembering the market cap of sports gambling is 3 times larger than it is for pro sports in general, 120 billion versus 40 billion for pro sports. Much of that being commoditized, by the way, in the form of the NFL, and then college football is now getting into that with the NIL, and that's going to be a major mess if they don't get a hold of that, and the NBA. But primarily the NFL is the main offender, even though the NBA was the first one to get caught. And also, I think by extension, so getting in bed with the gambling companies is the first thing. The second thing, I think, was that led to this NBA bust, and it's going to lead to many more of the gambling busts that we're seeing across America with all this corruption in the sports landscape, is that it opened it up to the public, including the players. So when you think of gambling, when you thought of gambling, like when you watch an old mafia movie, for example, you think of either two things, really. A casino that was legalized in Vegas primarily. If you ever watched the movie Casino with Robert De Niro and Sharon Stone, for example, you've seen what that looks like. Or it was an illicit gambling ring where gambling was not legal and not allowed, which was commoditized primarily by the Italian mafia, among other non-good actors. I'll put it that way. And so when sports gambling, you had to go to a bookie, you had to go to a place, you had to go to a hall where they checked your ID, they checked your age, all this, and I'm sure they do with DraftKings and FanDuel. I don't sports gamble, but it's just they opened the floodgates to everyone with a smartphone. And now it was both open and attached to the players and the fans. You have people saying, brought to you by DraftKings, brought to you by FanDuel. Pat McAfee is exactly the same way. I believe his deal, I looked it up when I was doing research for the show, and please correct me if this is wrong, but I think he's making $120 million from FanDuel right now over the course of his contract. And Pat McAfee has players in the NFL, in the NBA on his show all the time. He is very close to people like Tyrese Halliburton and a lot of the players in the Indianapolis Colts, where his show is based out of. And you attach this to, now you can bet on fantasy football legally. You can bet on social media legally. Kalshi, Polymarket, all these other betting services. These are more for cultural things and not necessarily for sports, but you get what I'm saying. It's blurred the lines, and it's created a very parasitic, this is more of the Terry Rozier angle, and maybe the Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones angle, but it has created definitely the Terry Rozier angle, because there was a video that went viral with Terry Rozier obviously throwing games and things like that. It was not a good video. You should look it up. It's really something. It created a very parasitic relationship between the players of the sports and the fans that is now open to immense amounts of corruption that now, like I mentioned with Terry Rozier, with Jonte Porter, with whoever else that's going to be implicated in this, which tanking for draft players, by the way. I think that's what Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones are probably going to get in trouble for, especially with Chauncey Billups at the Trailblazers. They were trying to tank for, I believe, Victor Wembanyama, so he told people to throw games. I believe that's what the accusation is, and the poker stuff and everything. But tanking is a very real thing. I mean, you could maybe open an investigation of the New York Jets right now at the time of this recording. They traded away Sauce Gardner. They traded away Quinn Williams. They're trading away all their good players, with the exception of like Garrett Wilson, a couple other people. They're young draft picks. And so it's like this is what, there's no boundaries anymore, I think is what I want to say, between the sports media people, or not the sports media people, between the sportsmen and the people in charge of the sportsmen, namely the coaches and the front office staff, and the fans. They all have similar incentives. Incentives drive everything. And that's where this is all leading to. And then the real kicker, and the third reason why the gambling companies have caused this massive wound to open up, is that they paid media companies and other podcasters. Rogan is involved in this. Podcasters, institutional paid corporate media companies to pilfer gambling ads to other people. Now, it's not enough that gambling is legal. Gambling is advertised everywhere. Every UFC pay-per-view, every NFL game, every NBA game. On the courts in some cases. Said by the announcers in some cases. Said by the podcasters. And so the final straw of this was the gambling companies took a play from the pharma companies. They did exactly what they did. They copied their strategy. And they flooded the airwaves, first in independent media, and like Pat McAfee was obviously the biggest example of this. And I'm not trying to pick on Pat McAfee, but he's certainly involved in this. And not involved meaning he did anything illegally. I don't know if Pat did anything illegally or not, but in terms of evangelizing sports gambling and making an opening for people to get caught up in this, Pat McAfee is certainly involved in that, as is Joe Rogan. But they flooded and other people, obviously. They flooded the airwaves and independent media. They gave it to all the money to all the podcasters because it was new, and podcasters need to take more risk on advertising. They cannot do safe ads because people don't trust podcasts as much. They're basically saying all these more off-brand products. But later in mainstream sports media as well, with ads for, again, brought to you by DraftKings, brought to you by FanDuel. And again, you have people like Terry Bradshaw talks about FanDuel now. It's crazy how much this has sunk into our culture and sports media, which has allowed, it's just a further gamification of the media that drives the narrative around sports. It is not the game itself in many ways now. It is who is going to win, not based on what's happening on the field, but what's happening in Vegas, what's happening in the gambling markets. And it's a problem, man. Like, it's a real big problem. Like, our narrative, the narrative of sports journalism, of sports media, of sports news, of sports commentary is all centered around gambling. And that's like, it's destructive. I'll just put it that way. It is destructive to sports. It devalues sports. It devalues the fans. And it's not good for anybody. It's not. And there needs to be a reckoning among this, a massive reckoning among this. And I think that this NBA story, we'll see what happens as it unfolds and as the FBI reveals more names and does all these things. I think this is going to be a very big deal. And I think there are going to be a lot of people going to prison for a long time. A lot of people are going to rat on people and pull more into this. It's a big deal. And the people who don't think it's a big deal, I think they're really missing something, because I think this is going to be a massive, massive deal for a very long time.